The world is just drowning in information, but true understanding. That requires structure. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the intellectual battles that really shape all knowledge. We're talking about the concept of a school of thought. And this isn't just about dusty philosophy. A school of thought is that shared foundational perspective, the core intellectual assumptions that guide a discipline, whether it's ancient ethics, modern physics, or, how we run the global economy. These competing ideas aren't just historical footnotes. They are the fundamental building blocks of how you and I organize and understand reality.
And that's really the mission today. We want to trace the trajectory of these foundational and often competing intellectual traditions. We're going across millennia and vastly different fields. We want you to see that knowledge evolves not in a straight line, but through this constant productive tension between these major conceptual frameworks. We're going from rival ethical codes in 500 BC China straight through to today's debate over the very structure of the cosmos itself.
Okay, let's unpack this and maybe begin where so much foundational thinking began, ancient China. We're starting during the chaotic late spring and autumn period, so roughly 500 to 221 BC. This turbulence led to one of history's greatest intellectual explosions, what they call the 100 schools of thought.
Right. Chaos breeds philosophy. And this era gave birth to these comprehensive philosophical systems that, they defined governance and culture for 2,000 years. To show you the depth of their conflict, we can just look at three major schools and see how fundamentally they disagreed on human nature and the purpose of the state. So first you have Confucianism. It's all about ethical behavior, strict moral codes, and these prescribed social relationships.
The idea that everyone has their place.
Exactly. Confucius believed that if society was ordered properly, everyone would fulfill their role. The guiding principle was often cited as, let the ruler be a ruler and the subject a subject. The goal was to cultivate the junzi, the superior person.
That's a highly optimistic view of human nature, right? That we can all be taught to be good and self-regulate.
Absolutely. Which brings us to their radical opposition, legalism.
Yeah, the cynics.
The ultimate cynics. Legalists, like Han Fei, held a completely opposite view. They argued that human nature is just, incorrigibly selfish.
So all that moral teaching is a waste of time.
It's useless. According to them, the only way to maintain order is discipline imposed from the top and the absolute strict enforcement of law.
That tension moral guidance versus iron rule, that's alive and well in every government debate today. It seems legalism exalted the state's power above everything else.
It did. But then you get a third, equally compelling system, Mohism, founded by Muzi.
The egalitarians.
Radical egalitarians. They advocated for impartial care, which gets translated a bit misleadingly as universal love, but the core belief was everyone is equal before heaven.
And they were hyper-practical too, right? Very frugal.
Precisely. They condemned all the extravagant rituals and music that Confucians loved, arguing for extreme frugality. What's fascinating here is how these conflicts inform each other. Legalism won the short-term political battle, sure, but the lasting influence of Confucianism shaped the social structure of China, and it was always pushing back against state overreach. The tension is the story, not just the victory of one side.
Okay, now let's shift to the parallel ancient Western concept, which really lays the groundwork for our computing thread. Computational natural philosophy. From the pre-Socratics forward, they saw the world as a structured cosmos, a logos, a rational order you could understand through logic and math.
And that foundational belief that the universe is logical and structured, that's the intellectual precondition for all modern science and computation. Galileo captured this perfectly. He argued that nature is a book written in the language of mathematics.
Without that conviction, you don't even start looking for the rules.
You don't. The search for computational rules to govern the universe doesn't even happen.
Speaking of rules, let's trace that computational thread forward by, 2 millennia. The critical bridge connecting ancient symbolic logic to modern AI was really built by Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz in the 17th century. We often see him as a mathematician, but he was a deeply ambitious philosopher.
Oh, he had a monumental vision. It was all based on the belief that if you could define language universally and apply logical deduction, all human problems could be solved. He envisioned 3 interconnected systems.
Okay, break them down.
So first, the Mathesis Universalis. Think of it as a universal science, or an encyclopedia of all human knowledge.
Right.
Second, the Characteristica Universalis, a universal computational language. This is supposed to be the ultimate symbolic alphabet designed to eliminate all linguistic ambiguity.
And if I can use a modern analogy, it's like a universal Google search, but for ideas.
Yes, But even more powerfully, it's a universal programming language, which then powers the third element, the calculus ratiocinator.
The logic engine.
Exactly. The formal system of rules that would let you manipulate the symbols of the characteristica to automatically derive new, certain truths. It was a machine for logical deduction.
That's such a powerful idea. But when we look at today, we have large language models, which are, well, they're fundamentally statistical prediction engines, not these pure logic machines. So if Leibniz dreamed of this ultimate rational encyclopedia, where do our LLMs fit? Are they his dream or just a really good imitation?
That's a great question. The success of LLMs like ChatGPT certainly feels like the beginning of the Mythosis Universalis, a computationally built universal encyclopedia. But, and this is the key, they are still primarily statistical models working with subsymbolic information. They realize the encyclopedia part of his dream, but not yet the pure, rational deduction engine of the calculus ratiocinator.
That's a perfect distinction. Now, building on this symbolic versus statistical debate, we get to Alan Turing. His biographer actually sees him primarily as a natural philosopher who is focused on the mind.
Turing built conceptual systems that underpin AI today. He formalized Leibniz's abstract idea with the Turing machine, the theoretical model of symbol manipulation all modern computers rely on. But he also crossed into cognition. He developed the concept of the unorganized machine, which was effectively an early blueprint for a neural network. It was this trainable system that he hypothesized could model the infant human cortex.
And the ultimate test of believability, of course, is the imitation game.
Yes, the Turing Test. It was designed to assess a machine's ability to imitate human dialogue convincingly. But crucially, it only tests the output, the ability to generate believable conversation, not whether the machine possesses genuine consciousness. That boundary has always been key.
This whole quest to define the structure of intelligence, it ran parallel in early psychology. They were also fighting over foundational definitions of the mind itself. You had structuralism,
Which was very reductionist. They were trying to break mental processes down into the smallest possible components using introspection.
a molecular approach.
Exactly. And it was quickly met with opposing schools. Functionalism shifted the focus entirely. They basically said, who cares what the components are? What matters are the roles and functions of mental processes. How does the mind allow humans to respond and adapt? They were interested in the purpose of thought.
And then the radical rejection of all of that, Gestalt psychology.
That's right. Gestalt argued that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. They just rejected the structuralist idea that you could understand thought by dissecting it.
Yeah.
You lose the essence. This intellectual fight, what is the right level of analysis, the component or the function? That's the exact kind of tension that drives every field we're looking at.
That tension over structure and function is a perfect bridge. Let's shift from the structure of the mind to the structure of the market. We're moving to a philosophical conflict that truly forms the backbone of modern policy, the split between the classical and the Keynesian schools of macroeconomics.
And what's fascinating here is that their entire policy difference really rests on one core, non-negotiable assumption. It's about time and how flexible prices are.
Yeah.
The classical school focuses exclusively on the long run. They fundamentally believe that prices and wages are fully flexible, and that markets will always eventually self-correct and clear.
Right. Their confidence is summarized by that enduring motto. In the long run, prices always adjust. They assume the system is self-healing.
Exactly. Then the Keynesian school takes the polar opposite view. They focus their entire analytical vision on the short run. They argue that markets do not clear in the short run because prices and wages are sticky. They resist change.
And this justifies their laser focus on immediate crises, which is perfectly captured by Keynes' famous, slightly fatalistic quote, "In the long run, we are all dead."
It's a deeply humanizing perspective, isn't it? It fundamentally changed policy. If the long run is all that matters, why bother intervening now?
And that's the core of the conflict.
It is. Because classicals believe in the market's self-correcting efficiency. They advocate for the least government intervention, a laissez-faire approach. They argue fiscal policy has no scope to improve outcomes.
But the Keynesians, seeing the short-run disaster, argue for active government intervention, counter-cyclical monetary and fiscal policy designed to stabilize things and mitigate those devastating business cycles.
They see fluctuations not as some kind of efficiency, but as clear market failures that need correcting.
So when you look at a recession, one school sees a market cleansing itself, the other sees a catastrophe that demands a response.
It's a pure school of thought conflict, all based on assumptions about time and market stability.
Now let's take that same structural analysis, the symbolic versus the subsymbolic, the conscious versus the automatic, and bring it back to the contemporary divide in AI. Let's frame it with Daniel Kahneman's two cognitive systems, System 1 and System 2.
So current LLMs like ChatGPT are deep neural networks operating solely on subsymbolic processing. They are the absolute epitome of System 1 thinking.
Fast, intuitive, reflexive.
Exactly. It's reflexive, non-conscious pattern recognition, using data compression to generate believable outputs based on all the existing human knowledge it was trained on.
So they're incredible mimics. They can transform existing knowledge, but they aren't reflective thinkers who generate knowledge from first principles.
Precisely. If we want AI to model System 2 reasoning, which involves slow, symbolic manipulation, logic, and the ability to generate entirely new knowledge de novo and understand causality, we need a breakthrough.
So does that mean we've hit a philosophical wall? Do we need to abandon the current neural network path?
Well, that's the critical question. The prevailing thought is that the next evolution requires hybrid computing models. We need to integrate the statistical power of neural networks with those older symbolic computing approaches, Leibniz's calculus Ratiocinator, to allow the system to switch between fast pattern recognition and slow, deliberate reasoning.
So you need both.
You need both. Without that integration, System 2 remains out of reach.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, maybe even a little strange. Do these competing schools of thought define the very fabric of reality itself? Let's introduce naturalist computationalism, championed by people like Stephen Wolfram. It's the idea that the universe is, at a fundamental level, a computational system, governed by universal computational processes.
And if the universe is a computation, then what are the rules? What's the underlying structure? That question takes us into the highest-stakes conflict in theoretical physics, quantum gravity research, the search for the microscopic structure of space-time.
Which is just completely fractured into competing schools.
At least three major ones. You have those focused on quantizing general relativity, GR. They try to apply quantum rules to macroscopic variables of space-time, like loop quantum gravity. Then you have the top-down theories, which assume space-time is fundamentally made of tiny strings or loops. That's superstring theory.
So on one side, you try to build quantum theory into the existing GR structure. On the other, you create a new fundamental object. The string and hope GR emerges from it.
That's the classic divide. But the third conceptual framework offers a really radical philosophical departure, the emergent or hydrodynamic view.
Okay, explain that one, because it seems to be the one that fundamentally changes our core assumptions about reality.
So this school views general relativity not as a fundamental theory, but as the low-energy hydrodynamic regime of a deeper microscopic theory.
Like the relationship between water and H2O molecules.
That is the perfect analogy. When you heat a gas, you use the concept of temperature. Temperature is a collective variable. It describes the average state of trillions of moving atoms, but it is not a fundamental property of any single atom.
I see. So the mathematical structure of space-time we use in GR is like the temperature of the universe. It's a collective, averaged-out variable.
Precisely. And in this view, if you try to apply quantum rules directly to that macroscopic metric, you're trying to quantize the equivalent of temperature.
Right.
It fundamentally misidentifies the level of organization that actually matters.
And that insight is borrowed directly from the condensed matter physics paradigm, the idea that space-time could be a condensate. What are the implications of that?
It implies a phase transition hypothesis. If space-time is fundamentally quantum, then the Planck energy, an unbelievably high temperature, may mark a phase transition, just like water freezing into ice.
So in this framework, the origin of the universe is just the start of a new phase.
It's just the beginning of a new low-energy phase, and the big reveal there is what came before.
That there was a before.
That there was an epoch before the Big Bang. Before that phase transition, the structure of space-time was entirely different, possibly not even measurable using concepts like distance or time. It would require a completely different set of variables and a totally different language, far removed from general relativity, to describe its dynamics.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? The unifying thread throughout this deep dive is that from ancient Chinese systems for governing society to modern cosmological theories defining the before of the Big Bang, competing schools of thought are the engine of human knowledge. They are the essential structures we use to organize, process, and, ultimately challenge our most fundamental assumptions.
And this continuous contention is precisely what forces deeper understanding. Just as the new Keynesians had to build micro-foundations to address classical criticisms, and AI researchers now seek hybrid models to escape System 1 limitations, all intellectual progress relies on synthesizing or transcending existing schools. So when you look at a problem, you almost have to first ask, which school of thought am I currently operating within?
It's your question.
And here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on. If we accept the premise that everything computes, from ancient logic machines to LLMs to space-time itself, the concept risks becoming trivial, right? If everything computes, the word means nothing. The ultimate challenge for any system, whether it's a living cell, an economy, or space-time, is not just identifying the components, it's defining the precise level of organization and the type of computation that truly matters. So how might thinking about your own field of interest in terms of competing schools help you identify your next breakthrough moment? Maybe just by focusing on a different level of organization than all your rivals.